Hello and welcome to Thrive Tribe. When we talk about artificial intelligence, it's pretty easy for our minds to jump straight to the worst case scenarios. You know, we hear concerns like job loss, privacy invasion, or even the classic Skynet example from the movie. And those concerns, while some might seem a bit extreme, they are actually quite legitimate in many ways. The sheer speed at which AI is developing is one thing. Couple that with the huge resources big companies are pouring into it. Sometimes that even leads to these emergent behaviors that engineers themselves don't fully understand yet. There's a real AI race happening, and it raises some valid questions about priorities like short-term profits versus long-term safety. Should we be concerned about these emergent behaviors? Let's explain first what emergent behaviors are. Emergent behaviors in AI basically refers to capabilities or patterns that weren't explicitly programmed. They weren't anticipated by the developers. They just sort of arise from the really complex interactions inside the model, often after it's seen massive amounts of training data. It's kind of like building a super sophisticated machine and then suddenly it starts doing something new that you never told it to do. And it's a safety concern because if we don't fully understand why an AI does what it does, or if it develops capabilities we didn't intend, it just becomes much harder to predict and control its actions, especially as these systems get more and more powerful. So today, we're going straight to the source. We will learn from Demis Hassabis on one of his interviews on YouTube. He's the CEO of Google DeepMind, definitely one of the most influential figures in AI today. Our mission is to move beyond just those initial headlines and dig into what's truly happening in the world of AI. How it's being developed, and what incredible potential it holds for our future. We will learn straight from someone who's, right at the absolute forefront. So when we talk about large language models, LLMs, it can still feel a bit like a black box for a lot of people. At a very basic level, LLMs are trying to predict the next word, like in a sequence of words. They do this by analyzing just a vast training set of language, looking for patterns, relationships between words. But the key thing isn't just spitting back what they've seen. It's about generalizing, producing novel, coherent responses to your questions. Modern chatbots, they're essentially sophisticated question and response machines. They're fine-tuned to act like assistants, but they're still performing that same core function. However, if they don't actually have the information, or maybe no internet access, they might just, make things up. That's what we call hallucinations. The hallucination problem. Sounds like you're constantly being refined though, and that brings us to some pretty recent leaps forward, like what DeepMind is doing with something called DeepThink. What's really fascinating here is how AI training has evolved. It started with basic retraining. Then they added reinforcement learning feedback. That's where the AI learns through trial and error, basically gets rewarded for good outputs and penalized for bad ones. Now there's a third really crucial part, inference time training, or maybe easier to think of it as thinking. It gives the model many cycles to sort of go over its answer before it actually outputs it. DeepThink takes this to the maximum. It basically gives the AI more time to think, even doing what they call parallel thoughts, and then choosing the best one, like exploring different lines of reasoning simultaneously. And this capability, interestingly, was actually pioneered nearly a decade ago with AlphaGo. The ultimate goal here is really to put the most accurate and helpful responses in front of you, and significantly reduce the chance of those hallucinations. The biggest technical challenge in making DeepThink work at scale is not just about needing more computers or solving fundamental algorithm problems. It's definitely a mix. The computational power is certainly a big factor. You're giving the model many more turns to think, so it means way more calculations. But it's also about optimizing the algorithms themselves, making those thought steps as efficient and effective as possible. Things like designing the right search strategies for those parallel thoughts and then figuring out a robust way for the AI to critique and select its best response. Those are pretty significant algorithmic hurdles that DeepMind is still working hard on. So moving beyond just language, the long-term goal is for these AIs to have a world model, which sounds big. A world model basically means a system that can understand not just language, but also things like audio, images, video, really all sorts of input, and potentially output across these different modalities too. This is absolutely critical if you want AI to be a truly good assistant. It needs to understand the physical context around you. Think about robotics. For robots to work robustly out in the real world, the robot has to understand its physical environment, not just text commands. And that's kind of what's holding back robotics today. It's generally not the hardware anymore. It's the software intelligence. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Demis Hassabis is deeply interested in how AI can help solve major global problems. DeepMind is already working in areas like mathematics using AI to discover new theorems, new algorithms. Material science accelerating the prediction of properties for new compounds, maybe like superconductors. Fusion research helping to control plasma stability. Renewable energy optimizing grid efficiency. Climate modeling improving long-term forecasts. Lots of areas. The closest and probably the most near-term application they see is in drug discovery. That builds directly on their AlphaFold work, which led to the spin-out company Isomorphic Labs that reimagines drug discovery process. It usually takes something like a decade, maybe more, to bring a new drug to market. It is such a long, difficult process and incredibly laborious, painstaking work, and very, very expensive. Usually starts with the research phase, identifying a target, maybe specific protein or gene involved in a disease, then developing a compound, a molecule that interacts with that target. Then comes maybe up to 7 years, sometimes more, of lab testing and animal testing. And most compounds actually fail here, either because they don't work or they're toxic. And if something looks promising after all that, then you have 3 phases of human clinical trials. Each of those can take several years. Again, something like 90% of drugs that enter human trials still fail. And then, finally, more regulatory approvals. So now you can see why it takes so long and costs so much. AI can dramatically speed up that initial, say, 7-year discovery phase to rapidly identify promising targets and potentially design compounds much faster than traditional methods. It can also potentially predict toxicity and side effects much, much earlier in the process, so you can weed out the poor candidates before you spend millions on human trials, which makes sense. And even during the trials themselves, AI can significantly speed up gathering the data, analyzing it, maybe identifying subtle patterns that humans might miss. The bottom line is, we could potentially get better drugs and treatments developed way, way faster. Just imagine the kind of impact that could have on curing hundreds of diseases that currently take decades of research. The potential there it's immense, revolutionizing medicine like that. Beyond just making human tasks faster, there's this other really cutting-edge thing happening that takes it a step further. AI is starting to design and improve other AIs. Projects like AlphaEvolve, tackling this kind of self-improving cycle where maybe humans aren't the only engineers anymore. It's definitely a very promising path. AlphaEvolve is quite a breakthrough. It combines evolutionary methods sort of like survival of the fittest for algorithms with large language models to invent completely new algorithms. Demis has hinted that humans might eventually be removed from parts of the equation. For now, though, it still definitely has humans in the loop. It's more about improving the broader AI ecosystem right now, like designing better algorithms for general use or even helping design better chips. It's not yet directly improving the specific AI that built it in, like a tight loop, but the trajectory seems clear. This idea of a self-improvement loop is definitely something we're heading towards in the future. That leads us kind of naturally to the long-term dream, AI agents. These personal assistants that could essentially take a week's worth of work you give them and just go execute it for you. To offload all the mundane administrative work, the stuff nobody likes doing, and just make our lives more enjoyable. Like, having an AI plan your entire dream trip to Europe, flights, hotels, maybe even daily itineraries based on your interests. All too sounds amazing. How far off are we from that kind of reality? And what's the biggest hurdle holding it back? Just to put it into context, we are in year 2025 today, and Demis hopes we're maybe perhaps about a year away from that level of capability for many sort of common tasks. A year for certain types of tasks. But the biggest bottleneck right now is really the reliability of the reasoning processes and the tool use. Because even a tiny error rate, say 1%, can compound significantly over tasks that have many steps. And lots of interesting applications, like that trip planning, might require 50 or even 100 steps. So you need near-perfect accuracy for people to really trust it and find it truly useful. That's the main hurdle. That capability, though it naturally brings up some critical consideration, all this power, all this potential, it brings us right back to those initial public concerns we started with. Things like privacy, data security, the impact on jobs. There will be societal impact on employment, especially as these AI agents get better at handling complex tasks. And DeepMind definitely understands that job displacement is a serious concern. Demis believes it's really vital for society as a whole to plan for this transformation. Their focus tends to be on ensuring AI augments human capabilities, frees us from drudgery. But they absolutely acknowledge that this shift will necessitate new approaches, things like education, retraining, maybe even new economic models to support people through the transition. They emphasize that the companies developing the AI have a real responsibility to be part of that wider societal conversation and planning. It's not just about the tech. On the privacy and trust front, companies like DeepMind has plans to build trust with users, especially when these AI agents could have access to so much personal data. DeepMind's stated stance is that they were trying to be responsible role models with these frontier technologies. Part of that is very deliberately showing what AI can be used for good. I mentioned medicine, biology, but also climate energy. They really emphasized that it's incumbent on the companies themselves to behave thoughtfully and responsibly. The overall vision is for the AI to feel like your AI, working on your behalf under your control. That's certainly the goal. And what about new devices, like those Android XR glasses? They look mind-blowing, but they immediately raise pretty significant privacy flags, don't they? How do we ensure the privacy of other people when devices with cameras and microphones become, well, potentially ubiquitous? First, making it incredibly obvious when the device is on or off, like clear visual indicators, is absolutely essential, foundational. Beyond that, though it really requires a kind of societal agreement, new norms need to develop, and potentially government regulations and legislation on how we actually want to use these kinds of popular and useful devices in public spaces. Well, it's partly why that technology is still in the trusted tester phase. We're trying to think about these societal impacts ahead of wide release, which is interesting and probably fair given how fast this AI stuff is moving. And there is this deeper concerns, this sort of Skynet or existential risk that worries us. While those scenarios are often sensationalized in the media, Demis Hassabis actually takes the long-term safety of advanced AI very, very seriously. DeepMind has dedicated research teams focused specifically on AI safety and alignment. They're actively working on the hard problems of how to ensure these powerful systems remain beneficial and controllable, even as they become potentially much more intelligent than humans. So it's definitely not dismissed. It's an active foundational area of research for them. So let's wrap this up. I think Demis is incredibly proud of the AI for science work, especially AlphaFold. It's apparently now a standard tool used by over 2 million researchers worldwide. In biology and medical research, it's accelerating discoveries literally every day. That's a huge impact already happening. And for the near future, his vision seems to be very much about AI enriching your life, but also protecting your mind space, protecting you from the constant digital bombardment we all feel. He believes a truly personal digital assistant, one that works quietly on your behalf, surfacing information only when you actually want or need it, rather than constantly interrupting you. He thinks that can be a profound answer to the information overload problem. What's fascinating there is that someone right at the forefront of building this technology sees its ultimate purpose as kind of freeing us from technology's downsides, cutting out the mundane stuff, removing the digital noise, allowing us to focus on what truly matters. Travel, hobbies, and maybe most importantly, spending quality time with friends and family. It certainly makes you feel like maybe it's not all doom and gloom, that there are super intelligent, very talented people behind the wheel here, with maybe a firmer grasp on things than many realize. So if you started listening to me with a feeling maybe a little overwhelmed or even anxious about AI, I hope you now have a clearer understanding of not just the challenges and the very serious considerations being addressed, but also the incredible and often quite surprising ways it's being developed to actually improve our lives. The journey from just predicting the next word to potentially curing diseases in weeks and maybe freeing up our mental space is truly remarkable when you think about it. And this technology, while it's moving at an astonishing pace, it is being guided by individuals who seem deeply committed to its responsible application and its potential for profound societal good, even while they're grappling with these really complex issues like emergent behaviors and long-term safety. And maybe this leaves us with a kind of provocative thought for you, the listener. Imagine the mind space that a truly intelligent AI assistant could free up for you personally. What passions, what relationships, or what kind of personal growth would you invest that time and energy in if the mundane parts of your life were expertly managed by your own personal AI? And maybe what new societal agreements might we need to forge together to make that vision not just possible, but a truly equitable and universally beneficial reality for everyone? That's all I got for you today. Thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you learned something new. What are your thoughts on this? Leave us a comment. If you want to see more content like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. My name is Alex, and thank you for listening. Bye.